Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the EPiC Auditors Autumn Seminar, the title of which is Shaping a Compliant Future, how we achieve and sustain, how we achieve and demonstrate sustainable compliance. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Richard Andrews and I'm the Managing Director at EPiC Auditors, but I may be a familiar face to many of you, having been at the MHRA for 18 years as part of the GMP Inspectorate. And had the opportunity to present at many of the symposiums that MHRA ran. So I've been with EPiC now for just coming up for 3 years, and EPiC Auditors is a consortium of ex-MHRA inspectors and independent pharmaceutical consultants. And we provide help and support to the pharmaceutical industry in the areas of GXP and quality. Over the years, we've assisted many types and sizes of company, conducting audits, mock inspections, and delivering training and education, providing proactive compliance advice, and supporting non-compliance remediation. If you're not already aware, we've got some expo booths, and there's an expo booth which will give a little bit more information and background about the services that EPiC provide. And please take the opportunity during the breaks to have a look at that, so that you get a further idea of our services. But coming back to today, we're really pleased to be delivering this seminar, which follows on from the successful event that we held in February and builds on the theme of that event of ensuring ongoing compliance. So hopefully you'll have all seen the agenda for today. And really through this seminar, we aim to provide updates on recent changes to the GMP and GDP guidelines and regulations, with a particular focus on Annex 1. We aim to highlight changes to inspection practices and a direction of travel, and how MHRA are sort of moving in terms of their oversight. We'll discuss some tools and practices to maintain compliance. We're going to present some current and future Annex 1 pitfalls and deficiencies in order to allow you to hopefully avoid those in the future. We're going to provide some insight into the changes arising from implementation of the clinical trials regs and some points to consider at the IMP GCP interface. And we'll also explore the challenges and considerations when moving from an R&D to a GMP environment. Although all of the EPiC speakers are ex-MHRA inspectors, it's always great to hear from current inspectors, and we're really pleased to be joined later on today by Rick Parker, who's the Senior GMP Inspector at the MHRA. And Rick will be delivering an MHRA update on Annex 1, with a view to the changes that have been implemented. So altogether, we hope that we're going to provide you with a thought-provoking and informative day, and there will be an opportunity for people to post questions throughout the day. At the right-hand side of your screens, you'll be able to put comments into the comment stream there, and what we will do is we will actually take any questions that are posed in there and collate those, and then we've got a Q&A session at the end. So we haven't actually built in any time for Q&As at the end of the sessions, with the exception of one, which is for Rick. So Rick can't join us for the end of day Q&A session, so hopefully we'll have some time for any questions for Rick at the end of his session. So as part of that presentation, if there are things that arise from there, please put those questions into the comments, and then hopefully we can pick up the majority, if not all, of those questions with Rick at that point. So just a couple of points in relation to housekeeping. I just want to mention that today's event's being brought to you through collaboration between EPiC Auditors and SEER Pharma UK, and SEER Pharma are providing the platform that we're using today. SEER Farmer held an event on Tuesday, at which I had the pleasure of speaking, and really successful, and didn't seem to be any real IT issues. So hopefully the same will be said for today. One of the things that does sometimes occur is that when you're on the stage, the screen can on occasions freeze, and if that does occur, we just ask that you you hit your refresh button on your browser, and that normally rectifies the problem. But if you are getting issues, we have got some support in the background, and please just put a comment in the comment section, and we'll be able to see that and hopefully try and address that for you. So just one thing to say in terms of the comments tab, it's not private. So whatever you put in that comments field will be seen by everyone. So please be nice, play nicely, as they say. But as I say, that's the opportunity where you can put any questions. There is a Q&A tab, which again we can pick questions up from there, but that won't be seen by everybody in the first instance. So I think the comments area is probably the best place. So with that, certainly hope that you're going to find the day interesting, informative, and thought-provoking. And I'll now move into the first session of today, which is going to be delivered by me, on recent updates to regulations and guidelines. Okay, so what I intend to cover during this part of the agenda is some updates to the regulations and guidelines in relation to the UK, and also a look ahead. So what potentially is in the offing as we look forward. We'll also then pick up on some updates to EU directives and regulations, and then again have a look at EU GMP updates, and again a look ahead there. And then we'll pick up just a couple of points in terms of international updates. So thinking about the changes from a UK perspective, I think when you actually take a step back from this, it's quite evident that the changes that are either being implemented or being consulted upon and that are forthcoming are really a result of the UK leaving the EU, and also the MHRA becoming a standalone regulator. So the first area that I'm sure many of you are aware of is the consultation by DHSC on the future strategy for batch testing of medicinal products in GB. And this consultation is now closed, and the current situation is that the responses to that consultation are being reviewed. But as you may be aware, there were the DHSC, Department of Health and Social Care, put forward 4 different options. So the first was option A, that there would be no import testing or UK QP certification or release of materials that are coming in from listed countries. So essentially there would be the conformity assessment for equivalent standards. It's open to all, but currently that would just be countries on a list, which is initially those countries in the EU and the EEA. And that list would be subject to review after 3 years. But under this, we would effectively have the current situation where a wholesaler in the UK can continue to import from the EU and the EEA. There'll be recognition of the EU QP certification, and there would then be the process of the oversight by the RPI. So the situation that we've got currently with the RPI setup. Option B was that there'd be no import testing, but there'd be implementation of UK QP certification and release from listed countries. Option C would be there'd be full quality control batch testing and implementing UK QP certification and release for all non-MRA countries. And then option D would be similar to option C, but it would be full quality control batch testing and implementing UK QP certification and release for specific based on a number of specific tests. So those were the four options, and as I was saying, the consultation's closed, so that's now currently the responses are being reviewed, and we wait the output from that. So the next area that where some new guidance has been issued is the MHRA guidance on NIMAR, on the NIMAR route. So this is for supply of medicines to Northern Ireland. And this has been implemented to ensure that people in Northern Ireland can continue to access prescription-only medicines should critical need be unable to be met through authorised products or any other existing regulatory routes. And essentially, this provides a route for the lawful supply of prescription-only medicines that are in compliance with UK and EU rules. Now, all of the medicines that could be supplied under NIMAR need to be a POM, so a prescription-only medicine, and the reason for that is that they will have been through the assessment by MHRA. The route doesn't allow for companies to actually ask for products to be listed on the what's being termed the NIMAR list. It's something that will be done based on assessment by the MHRA and also the Department of Health in Northern Ireland, along with the DHSC. So that list will change. It will be updated, and organisations can only supply products under the NIMAR route if they appear on that list. The products must be, as I say, a POM, and they can only have a PLGB product license, and they can be then supplied through normal routes. So that could be direct to the end user from GB, or it could be through supply to a wholesaler in Northern Ireland, and then subsequently on to the end user as the normal wholesale route. So probably one thing for organisations to bear in mind if they are supplying into Northern Ireland is that to essentially keep an eye on what's on that NIMAR list, so that you're actually not falling foul of supplying something with a PLGB that doesn't actually appear on that list, because that could change over time. One of the other pieces of news from the UK is that the MHRA has been added as a full ICH member. So when the UK was part of the EU, the membership essentially was via the EU. But having come out of the EU, MHRA were first of all an observer member, but now have actually been made a full member of ICH. So essentially got a seat at the table and fully involved in the ICH processes of review and approval of ICH documents. And a further piece of news in relation to the trade agreements, or essentially the akin to mutual recognition agreements with countries. So the Canada and United Kingdom Trade Continuity Agreement, the scope of that has been expanded to recognise GMP inspections resulting from inspections conducted outside of their own territories. So an example here is that if an inspection has been conducted in a third country, say India, for instance, by Canada or the UK, then the other party will actually recognise the result of that inspection as part of their ongoing surveillance programs. So Just one other area that that's actually hot off the press. So this was a blog post that came out in the past couple of days from the MHRA Inspector, and this is really announcing that the MHRA GMP Inspector are returning to their routine program of international GMP inspections. It's worth bearing in mind that the GMP inspectors have been doing some overseas inspections, and some of those in support of the vaccine rollout for COVID, but that hasn't been a routine program. But since April 2022, they've been running a pilot of overseas inspections, and that's deemed to be successful. And now they're returning to that routine program. So the blog goes on to say that we'll be adopting a risk-based approach, and in the first instance, we'll be prioritising inspections that have got the greatest impact on the UK public health and patient safety, and they'll be doing that in conjunction with the product licence assessors, and also utilising the existing risk-based inspection tools. They are asking organisations essentially, don't contact us, we'll contact you. So based on that prioritisation, they'll be setting the programme. But the aim is to actually ensure that they are able to get to all of the sites that they need to overseas as soon as possible. One of the other things that the blog does also confirm is that there's going to be a further extension to current GMP certificates. So there've been extensions in the expiry of GMP certificates to the end of 2021, and then that was subsequently extended to the end of 2022. But there is going to be a further extension to the end of 2023. So looking ahead from a UK perspective, one of the consultations that's been published by the UK again, which is something that I'm sure many of you are aware of, is the consultation on the clinical trials regulations, and that ran from January of this year through till the middle of March. And like the consultation on batch testing, the responses for that are currently being reviewed, and we await the response to that. I'm not going to say much more on that because we've got a session later on today from Michelle Yeomans, and she will cover clinical trials regulations and the European situation as well in a lot more detail. One other area that I just wanted to bring people's attention to is the retained EU law revocation and reform bill 2022, and this was something that was introduced on the 22nd of September of this year. And retained EU law is a category of UK domestic law that was created at the end of the transition period, and it consists of legislation that's been derived from the EU legislation, and that was preserved in the UK legal framework by the European Union Withdrawal Act, and the reason for that was to ensure continuity as the UK left the EU. But it was never intended to sit on the statute books indefinitely. So there is now a review of the legislation, and anything that won't be retained or that the government doesn't wish to preserve will actually expire on the 31st of December of 2023. So bit of crystal ball gazing here. We've obviously got the human medicines regulations, but you can see that within those regulations there is certainly some retained EU law, so that will be undergoing review. So my expectation there is that we will actually start to see some consultations on new legislation in relation to the legislation that's in place for the control of medicines in the UK. So coming up to the EU, updates to EU directives and regulations. So at the EU level, the clinical trials regulation entered into application at the end of January of this year, and that was supplemented by this Commission's delegated regulation, and then that's further complemented by the Commission guidelines on GMP for investigational medicinal products for human use. I'm not again going to talk in any detail around what's in that, because Michelle will cover this in her session. But one of the things that I did want to bring to people's attention, as a result of the changes to the for clinical trials, and the fact that there's now a GMP guide for IMPs, there's been a requirement to actually publish a new GMP directive. So people will be hopefully familiar with 2003/94, which was the GMP directive, but that's now been repealed. And the reason being is that 2003/94 covered GMP requirements for both medicines for human use and also investigational medicinal products for human use. So it covered both areas. Now that there's separate GMP been published for IMPs, there's a requirement to actually update the regulations around human medicines at that European level. So we've got the new GMP directive, and that's 2017/1572. So a new directive number for people to remember as they talk about the GMP directives at a European level. So just a couple of other updates here, specifically from a veterinary perspective. So there has been a new regulation issued for the community code relating to veterinary medicinal products, and that replaces 2001/82 EC, which was essentially the sister document to the directive that is in place for human medicines, 2001/83. So that's been updated. We've got a new regulation there. One of the things that's been introduced into the new regulation is controls around active substances. So there's a Commission implementing regulation on GDP for active substances, and that's been published. And there's also a further implementing regulation on GDP for veterinary medicinal products. So there's been some updates there, and the regulation itself does actually call for similar implementing regulations for GMP. And I think it's interesting to note that the introduction of the GMP for active substances and GDP for active substances is now aligned essentially with what the situation is for human medicines, because that was something that was not introduced for veterinary medicinal products at the time it was introduced for human. So moving on to the updates to GMP, and I'm sure people will be well aware of Annex 1, and we're going to hear a lot more on Annex 1 from Rick Parker and Darren Jones later on today. But long awaited, certainly a significant update, and that has now been published and has got a deadline for coming into operation on the 25th of August 2023, with the exception of one point around sterilisation of lyophilizers, which has got a longer period through to 25th of August 2024. Then we've got Annex 21, again something that has been talked about for a number of years. We've now finally got a publication of Annex 21, and that came into operation on 21st of August of this year. But it's interesting to note that this only covers physical importation. So that physical act of bringing a medicinal product into the EU from outside of the territory. And it specifically states that it excludes fiscal importation, whereby there is a financial transaction, but the stock doesn't actually leave the union. And it also excludes import for export, which is essentially the introduction that was actually introduced as part of the FMD changes, and that can be done under a WDA. So Annex 21 is out there, but it only really applies to the actual physical importation. So just looking ahead, and this is really taken from the work plan of the EMA GMDP Inspectors Working Group. So as you can see there, there's a number of areas where there are some changes in the offing. So Chapter 4 and Annex 11 being amended to assure data integrity, and that the final text for those is being provided to the Commission. Changes to Chapter 1, looking at industry adopting more risk-based approaches for the prevention of shortages, and again, final text provided to the Commission. So I think what we can expect there is that there will be publication of the draft text for consultation. Annex 15, that's been under review, looking at whether it needs to be updated in light of new technologies in terms of installations and products and processes, but also whether that can be extended to cover APIs. And that's really being driven by a lessons learned exercise that was carried out following the nitrosamines investigations. Further updates to Annex 16, again driven by the lessons learned exercise recommendations to actually provide additional guidance on batch traceability, and again similar driver for this, updates to the GMP and marketing authorization holders paper to ensure that there's adequate oversight and quality agreements with manufacturers from marketing authorization holders. And then for the ICH Q7, so the GMP for active substances, support to the members of the expert working group there to see whether there's opportunities to develop that guideline further, again building in the requirements of Annex 15 around qualification validation and making that mandatory through the API guidelines. And then there are some updates to some of the annexes relating to veterinary medicinal products. So we've got Annex 4 and Annex 5, where there's been a concept paper, there's review of those comments, and there's then the provision of updated text, and then provision to the European Commission following that. And then the GMP for novel veterinary medicinal products, for GMP for autogenous veterinary vaccines, again final text being provided to the European Commission. So we can see that there's some work ongoing there, and we expect that we'll start to see some further draft guidances coming out for review over the coming months and years. Just picking up on changes at an international level, so just wanted to mention the PIC's GMP guide, and that's been revised to include a new revision of the Annex 13 of the PIC's guide, and really that's been driven by the clinical trials regulations at an EU level, because there's that desire to maintain a level of harmonisation between the PIC's guidance and the EU GMPs. And the PICs have also introduced a new Annex 16. So Annex 16 in itself at an EU level is very EU specific in terms of the requirement for the qualified person and the roles and responsibilities of the QP. So Annex 16 was never formally adopted by PICs when it was published. However, upon review, they feel that there is guidance that is required and will help the industry. So they've adopted an Annex 16 on the certification by authorised persons and batch relief to give that guidance to PIC's participating authorities. And then just a mention around GAMP. So there's a second edition of GAMP 5 that was published in 2022, and this is a second edition rather than a full revision, because it maintains the principles and framework of the first edition. And as you can see there, there are various updates to that guidance to actually recognise the current business environment that organisations are now operating in. So something for people to cast an eye over and become aware of what the new guidance and is actually saying in those areas. So just in summary, as we can see, the regulations and guidelines continue to evolve as a result of the changes to the operating environment, technological advances, and the lessons learned within the field of pharmaceutical manufacture and distribution. And really, I think the message for organisations is that it's key that you've got mechanisms to stay abreast of these changes, and actually prepare for these new and different requirements, and make sure that you're doing that before the date of coming into operation. We see so many organisations where the new requirements come into operation, and then organisations start to think about them. That's far too late. So message is, make sure that you're aware of them, and make sure that you actually prepare such that you're able to ensure that your operations remain in compliance. So thank you for listening. If you've got any questions on any of that, as I say, if you pop them into the comments box, we'll pick those up and we will aim to address as many of those as we can at the Q&A session. Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do now is we'll move on to the next session of the morning. So I'd like to welcome Michelle Yeomans. Good morning, Michelle.
Morning, Richard.
So Michelle is going to deliver a presentation on demonstrating compliance and direction of travel. So really looking at how things potentially could move going forward, and what the regulators are looking for in terms of their oversight to assure themselves of compliance. So over to you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, and good morning, everyone. As Richard said, I'm here this morning to give an overview. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up.
Michelle, could you just move a little bit closer to your microphone? You sound pretty quiet. I think. Well, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Can you just say something, Michelle? Just.
Yep. I'm still here. Yep. I'm just waiting for my my slides to come up on the screen.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yep. Away we go.
Here we go.
Over to you.
Okay, thanks very much. Yes, good morning. I'm Michelle Yeomans, Operations Manager here at EPiC Auditors. And as Richard said, I'm here this morning to give you an update on the regulatory approaches post-pandemic, look at some of the international initiatives that are taking place. We'll also have a focus from an MHRA perspective. And then once we've talked through to gain an understanding of what it is that regulators are looking for in terms of demonstrating compliance, we'll take a look at what that might look like in practice. And then just at the end to summarise the direction of travel that we've discussed during the presentation. So I thought it would be useful as a starting point to reflect on the regulator's view on developing inspection strategies we highlighted at the EPiC symposium earlier this year, so that we can see what further work has taken place that provides an insight into future inspection approaches. We reported on the annual EPiC seminar and training for regulators, which took place as a virtual event in November 2021. And the focus of the seminar was on remote inspections and inspection strategy coming out of the pandemic. There were 54 national competent authorities participated from 48 different countries, and the purpose was to exchange views and lay foundations to support mutual reliance between inspection systems in the assessment of GMP compliance. So the conclusions that coming out of the seminar were that remote inspection processes were never completely envisaged to replace on-site inspections, but there was very much a place for hybrid inspections. We also provided some initial feedback from MHRA's experience of chairing the ICMRA COVID-19 Digital Transformation Working Group. So, ICMRA is an international executive level coalition that provides a global strategic focus for medicines regulators and gives strategic leadership on shared regulatory issues and challenges. So, their priorities include coordinated response to crisis situations. So, the COVID-19 pandemic provided an ideal opportunity to establish a working group to focus on the use of remote technology to facilitate regulatory oversight during the pandemic. So the subsequent reflection paper, which I've highlighted on the slide, which was published by the working group, noted that some regulatory agencies were evaluating whether to utilise remote approaches going forward. And there was again recognition that remote inspections could be useful in supplementing or in some cases replacing the need for an on-site inspection with remote or hybrid approaches. So the direction of travel was set for remote and hybrid inspections to form some part of the regulatory inspection strategy post pandemic. In June 2021, ICMRA established the Pharmaceutical Quality Knowledge Management System collaboration. So it's quite a mouthful, so I'll just be referring to it as PQKMS. And the collaboration was established to support the global development, manufacture, and supply of medicines. So in June 2022, the PQKMS collaboration announced plans for two pilot programs focusing on facility inspections and to streamline regulatory assessment of chemistry and manufacturing control post approval changes. So the hybrid facility inspection pilot involves collaborative facility assessment with inspectors on site at facilities and using virtual technology to allow inspectors or assessors or subject matter experts from other inspectorates to participate in the GMP inspection. The CMC related post approval changes pilot aims to explore the feasibility and potential for further collaboration and convergence amongst regulators in specific data expectations and assessment approaches when assessing manufacturing facilities for pre approval and pre license applications and reviewing post approval changes. Also related to CMC changes, in October 2022, US FDA released final guidance to assist the pharmaceutical industry in submitting comparability protocols for post-approval manufacturing changes. This guidance recommends a framework to promote innovation and continuous improvement in the manufacturing of quality products by encouraging the effective use of knowledge and understanding of the product and manufacturing processes, risk management activities over the life cycle of the product to be supported by an effective pharmaceutical quality system. The guidance describes the use of a comparability protocol, which is designed as a prospective, comprehensive plan of proposed post-approval CMC changes. And this is instead of requesting changes through a more burdensome process, supplement reporting process. In 2021, PICS coordinated a consultation exercise involving heads of agencies, partner organisations, key industry associations, and inspectors to discuss the possible future strategic orientation of PICS over the next 5 years. The strategic priorities and vision have been published in the strategic plan, which Richard referred to earlier, which will be used as a framework for actions that will be taken forward through annual work plans and specific initiatives. The vision of one inspection per site that is fit for all regulatory authorities indicates a greater use of the PICS Inspection Reliance Initiative and greater communication and information sharing among PICS participating authorities, which is consistent with the EPiC pilots to streamline regulatory assessments and inspection. So we can see that the direction of travel is building on remote and hybrid inspection approaches, looking at new ways for global regulators to be agile and make best use of resources and reduced regulatory complexity. By adopting the same requirements for the formats and data expectations in regulatory submissions and applying the same standards in regulatory review, assessment, and inspection to support reliance, that the aim is to benefit patients by supporting access to quality medicines. We can also see a move towards prospective notification of future changes through the use of managed plans or protocols. If we now focus and take a look at things from an MHRA perspective, we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic how MHRA made use of the innovative licensing and access pathway, or ILAP, to fast track the assessment of COVID-19 vaccines. ILAP was originally developed to deliver efficient and timely development of medicines and earlier patient access, and the approach has become the new norm and is now part of the changes to national licensing procedures at MHRA. The ILAP approach utilises a target development profile to create a unique roadmap utilising tools from a toolkit intended to drive efficiencies in the development programme, supporting data generation and evidence requirements. So we can see here similar themes with the ICMRA and US FDA CMC approaches. We'll hear more later in the IMP GCP interface session about MHRA's risk proportionate approaches to the implementation of clinical trial regulation, which is encouraging clinical trial sponsors to take available opportunities to risk adapt where appropriate, to risk assess, and to manage the risk and transparency by discussing them with MHRA. This is consistent with the international initiatives to encourage engagement with the regulator to inspire confidence and credibility in quality, regulatory, and product knowledge decision making. The blog article on the slide was written from a compliance team 1 perspective. So just as a reminder for the renaming of the inspectorate teams, the compliance team 1 covers the GCP, PV and GLP disciplines. But the sentiment is equally relevant to GMP when we take a look at the key themes emerging from MHRA's delivery plan for the years 2021 to 2023. At MHRA's board meeting in June 2022, Dr. June Rain reported on progress on the agency's ambitious 2-year transformation delivery plan. The report included a forward look to 2022 and 23 and reference to the executive team's proposal to refresh the delivery plan to ensure that the deliverables are aligned to focus areas and are achievable. New focus areas have been defined and new deliverables added, which has led to the rewording of the previous GXP inspection related deliverable, which was number 7 in the original delivery plan, which covers the delivery of innovative and interventions to ensure the UK has a secure supply chain providing high quality products. 2 areas of note, which I have included in the slide, is the intention to reduce regulatory burden by identifying COVID-19 flexibilities which are considered safe to embed, and to deliver a world-leading approach to inspections through the implementation of a new compliance strategy. The red text indicates changes to timelines, and the green text indicates new or reworded deliverables. So you can see that the previous deliverable, number 7, has now become 17 and has been reworded. So I think MHRA's continued participation in EPiCs will present a challenge with respect to the GMP inspections, as the new compliance strategy for a world-leading approach to inspection and the agency's wider business plan ambition to drive a new era in regulation will need to be compatible with the vision and priorities highlighted in the EPiC strategic plan, which I mentioned earlier. Although we are still awaiting publication of further details on what elements will feature in the GXP compliance strategy, at the MHRA's board meeting in September 2022, the progress update on the delivery of the plan quoted a target to finalise the compliance strategy through consultation with external stakeholders by the end of September 2023. So we should look out for a consultation on that topic to have your say. MHRA's participation in the ICMRA pilot of hybrid and on-site inspections suggests that remote and hybrid inspection approaches will become part of the GXP risk-based compliance strategy. And at the MHRA board meeting in September 2022, they confirmed that progress with the development of remote and hybrid inspections continues, with examples of piloting video technology for facility tours and a hybrid overseas inspection of bioequivalence and biosimilar clinical trials involving bioanalytical data being inspected remotely using agency-held software before travelling to complete the on-site inspection at the clinical and bioanalytical facilities. I think within the revised deliverable, reference to the compliance monitor process pilot suggests we could see more onus placed on licence holders and sponsors to demonstrate compliance. So compliance with applicable legislation and good practice requirements has always been a licence holders and sponsors' responsibility. but we could see more emphasis placed on a show and tell approach to demonstrating compliance. I mentioned the compliance monitoring process. So this process acknowledges that that it is common for companies that are at IAG to employ consultants to assist with the remediation activities. And this is something that EPiC has extensive experience of supporting, including reporting on progress to MHRA. A number of our consultants have been deemed eligible by the MHRA to act as compliance monitors in the Compliance Monitor Process Pilot for GMP and GDP remediation supervision activities. As part of the pilot process, the actions required to address compliance issues will be defined and agreed in a compliance protocol, and the company will be responsible for providing updates against the compliance protocol, and the accuracy of the information reported will be confirmed by the compliance monitor. This approach adopts the same compliance monitoring principles that are integral part of MHRA's routine risk-based inspection programme, which requires a site to identify and report key changes that indicate a significant change, whether that's an increase or decrease, in site risk to GMP compliance, product quality, and patient safety. So, from the compliance report template, that's examples of shift in performance, key personnel, changes to processes and products, facilities of equipment, data integrity, those kind of changes. The difference with routine compliance reporting is that it's an inspector rather than the compliance monitor that assesses and verifies the information and associated mitigating actions during a remote assessment or on site inspection. So we can see here how the compliance monitor concept is relevant to both routine inspections as well as in remediation cases. And we'll be hearing more from Darren Jones later on how proactive compliance monitoring can avoid the need for remediation and achieve sustainable compliance. So, depending on the success and lessons learned from the compliance monitor process pilot, the direction of travel could include additional opportunities for sites to take ownership for self or third party monitoring and reporting of compliance. So, hopefully, you'll see that consistent themes are emerging from the international initiative examples and the revised focus of MHRA's business plan, which highlight the need for adaptable, knowledge driven systems and effective quality assurance oversight to provide the foundation for consistent quality and supply. And this in turn gives regulators confidence to implement regulatory flexibilities and reduced regulatory burden that complements sustainable compliance. MHRA's GXP compliance strategy and associated risk score is likely to be based on the level of compliance demonstrated, including effectiveness of the pharmaceutical quality system, mitigating actions, ownership and commitment to delivering agreed CAPA, as well as the key attributes I've highlighted on the slide, which are key indicators that an organisation is capable of delivering sustainable compliance. So, if we have a better understanding of the key attributes that regulators are looking for, what does demonstrating compliance look like in practice? So, if we think about when compiling pre inspection requests or submitting compliance report updates, we need to think about what information is being requested. We need to understand the significance of the question to decide what and how to present the information. This demonstrates knowledge of GMP requirements and the appropriate use of tools to represent data in a concise manner. It's also important to be able to demonstrate availability of sufficient resources and expertise, because this gives credibility to CAPA plans that proposed actions and timelines will be met. And if we want to benefit from prospective approval for CMC post-approval changes, so that's from the initiatives that I mentioned earlier, we need to be able to demonstrate effective use of knowledge and a culture of continuous improvement. So inspectors or auditors will look to identify areas of change, like volume and frequency, that are likely to stress systems, and for repeat patterns in deviations that suggest that the root cause has not been addressed. So we need to make sure that we're making use of appropriate tracking and trending tools to provide feedback on key quality indicators, and also to increase product and process knowledge. Transparency was something that I mentioned earlier, that regulators are looking to see. So, transparent risk assessment evaluations are important. Credible mitigating actions and post-implementation effectiveness reviews help to show that ICHQ10 principles are truly understood and actively used. So, be transparent about what went wrong. Document the issue, how it was investigated, and that CAPA's been carried out, and that effectiveness checks have been completed. Because this is showing that the actions taken to mitigate risks could have a positive outcome by reducing the severity of deficiency ratings assigned by an inspector or auditor. To demonstrate effective monitoring and delivery on commitments, think about the content, the structure, and delivery on actions arising from management review, product quality reviews, self inspections, because this helps to show the senior management team's ability to understand and manage risks associated with their products and operations. It helps the regulator to build confidence and trust in management systems and the people and the processes, which again can have a positive impact on the risk rating assigned to a site and the re-inspection frequency, which in turn has a positive impact on the company reputation. And we'll be hearing more from Richard Andrews later on the effective use of tools and techniques to support continuous improvement and future proofing for compliance. So, just to summarise the direction of travel, 2020 saw the development of remote inspection approaches during the COVID-19 pandemic. 2021, we were starting to reflect on the experiences and looking at ways to incorporate remote and hybrid inspections into regulatory inspection strategies. By 2022, based on the need to ensure effective use of resource to address COVID-19 backlog and reduce regulatory burden to benefit manufacturers and patients, we're seeing pilots for harmonisation and agreement of post-approval changes, and in MHRA's case, the use of consultants as compliance monitors through the prospective notification and agreement of changes and required actions using managed plans and protocols. So, moving forward, look to 2023, we have the EPiC strategic plan and introduction of the ICMRA PQKMS pilots. It's showing a trend towards continued harmonisation and reliance on inspections by trusted regulators. The PIC's vision of one inspection per site that is fit for all regulatory authorities, and the pilot of hybrid inspections, we could see the meaning of inspection being redefined, which could lead to greater flexibility in the interpretation of mutual recognition and cooperation agreements. Although we're still waiting for publication of MHRA's consultation to finalise the GXP compliance strategy, depending on the success of the compliance monitoring process pilot and continued evolution of the remote and hybrid inspection processes, we could potentially see an expansion of the compliance monitor concept, with on-site inspections replaced by MHRA performing remote evaluations of compliance reports, which have been independently verified by QPs or consultants in situations where sustainable compliance can be demonstrated and regulatory flexibilities allow. So I think it's a case of watch this space to see what emerges going forward. So thank you for listening, and I'll hand back to Richard.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Very interesting presentation, and I think as you clearly outlined through the slides and in that summary, certainly a direction of travel in terms of that further international collaboration and certainly different ways of working. And I think, you know, the next few years are going to be very interesting in terms of what we see from in terms of that regulatory oversight and how that's actually implemented, and you know, whether we see more work sharing going forward. Yeah, very, very interesting to watch how that develops. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to move to a coffee break. Got the next presentation on it at 10:30. So please, yeah, make yourselves a cup of coffee. As I say, there is the expo booth where there's just a little bit more information about what EPiC can provide for you. We're also making recordings of all of the presentations today, and we're doing those in chunks. So in between the sections will be the section from the start of today through to coffee, and then likewise from coffee through to lunch, etc., etc. And they'll be available for people to review and replay. So you can access that through the replay button on the side of the presenter stage there. So once we finish this morning, we'll get that uploaded. It will take a few minutes for us to actually do all the wizardry in the background to allow that to happen, but that should be available hopefully midway through coffee, or if not later on today. And then they will be available after the event for at least 14 days, so people can go back in and actually view the recordings. So we'll leave it there for the time being. So we'll be back at 10:30 with the next presentation. See you shortly.